What's up, everybody? It's your boy Mike Ayers, and I'm here with Miss Elise and Mike, and we have a special guest today, Matt Rogers. He is a sixth grade teacher, and of course, as you all know, we are sitting down with teachers and principals and just, coming to them as parents because, not gonna lie, some parents are scared to just reach out to their schools or teachers to, just to figure out what's going on. And basically, Matt here has agreed to sit down with us and just have a normal conversation.
Yes. So
right?
Thank you for being here.
We
appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. And it's very important. Like Mike said, we've talked to one other teacher and one other principal, and they've had some really great information for parents that are concerned about education and their kids going back to school. So really, we wanted to start it off by just asking you your opinion on the whole 100% virtual, hybrid, and 100% in school, and then just ask what you're actually going to be doing and your personal preference.
Sure. Well, I think we're in some rather uncharted territories in terms of we're dealing with a pandemic, and there's all this misinformation out there in terms of how this virus affects kids, how it doesn't affect kids, and what school should look like. My opinion, I think there's benefits to all three models. Really, some kids work better at home all the time, whereas some kids need to have that structure of in-person, in-school classes every single day. So I personally prefer being on in-person 100%. In-person 100%, no restrictions. However, I can't say for certain that I know what this virus does to kids because there's so much misinformation out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm fine being cautious. I'll tell you right now, we're doing hybrid with my school. So that's basically the A-B model where kids are split into different cohorts and they go twice a week and then, or 3 times a week or whatever the case may be. And then they spend a certain amount of time at home. Selfishly, I'm okay with that because I get to go to work every 5 days of the week, right?
I love the honesty.
Right? But I also, my heart aches for parents because parents who have to be at work, who have those younger school-age kids who are unable to take care of themselves, that can be a challenge. Mm-hmm. It really can be a huge challenge that I think a lot of our parents are facing. And one of the things that I'm actually seeing parents start to do is form these little things called pandemic pods, where they're doing like a homeschool model where one day they'll send their kids here to this house and then the next day they'll be at this house, and they'll kind of rotate between the days in which they have them at home. And e-learners are doing the same thing, or people who are at home 100% are doing the same thing. They're deciding to rotate them throughout the neighborhood. Some who have the means available are actually hiring their teachers and paying them a full salary that the teachers would pay. And they're working full time, having school in their house. So what I think is really fascinating about this whole situation is that I think parents are some of the most creative individuals in the world, right? When the public school system shuts down and we have thousands upon thousands of kids who don't have access to their schools and their daily lives, I admire parents and their resourcefulness in figuring things out. So yeah, that's just kind of my general oversight and overview. I'm trying to be a little bit more optimistic about this year. When we went virtual last year, it was one of those things where it was frustrating. Mm-hmm. It was really frustrating because for us, we left for spring break and they said, hey, we just want you to know there's a chance that we may not be coming back the week after that, but really we don't foresee it going beyond that. No one could have predicted that the school system was going to shut down for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And having to turn on a dime that quickly, was challenging. Mm-hmm. It was really challenging, and even more challenging keeping all these kids engaged in their learning, holding them to the same standard that you would hold them to in the classroom, ensuring that they're getting the same rigorous education that they would get in the classroom. It really did feel impossible. Mm-hmm. There for a minute. It really did.
Yeah, It was intense for everybody, for the teachers, for the parents, and we've talked about that, just how you had nothing planned. It was just kind of okay, now you're doing this. And I think, yeah. So
that's a lot of parents' frustrations are stemming back from the end of the school year. And, and instead of saying, getting with teacher, even emailing or anything with teachers and saying, just trying to figure out, okay, so what's different now than it was back in the spring? Well, it's kind of obvious a little bit that, one, yes, we didn't have 100% guarantee of what the school year is going to start out to be like, but a lot of teachers were making plans like, okay, if we're going virtual, this is how I'm going to try and make it look, and if it's 100% in school, then it's as school as normal. But a lot of parents that I've talked to, it's just like, well, look at how it was the end of the last school year, and I'm like, you got to give the teachers some credit, because like you said, it was just a turn on a dime, and It was like, now you're asking them to do something completely different than they've ever done before.
Yeah.
So, and then us as parents, we have to, what parents need to start doing is just
connecting more
correct.
with the teachers.
Yes. Thank you.
And I think, what you're saying, it sounds like you said you're optimistic about this whole thing. And so you probably wouldn't have necessarily said that in the spring, just because it was just thrown at you. But it sounds like you're probably more optimistic just because there's more resources and you guys are...
We've had more training. Now, and to your point, there's kind of a few things I want to touch on. What's changed since the spring and now, we had more opportunities to really evaluate what went wrong and what we can do better at. There are still equity concerns, right? Mm-hmm. Concerns that not all kids have access to technology to be able to access their online learning. There are still concerns about child abuse.
Yes.
I know during the shutdown, I think it was in don't quote me on this, but I read somewhere 3 or 4 weeks, George Brockler's office saw a 50% decline in child abuse reports. Or was it 80? It was high. Mm-hmm. And you would normally associate that with something that's being positive. Mm-hmm. But it's not, because the people who typically blow the whistle, your youth ministers, your teachers, your sports coaches, things like that, those guys weren't there. So there was no one blowing the whistle on abuse like that. So you have kids who are living at home with abusive parents. And I'll tell you something right now, I almost have to make a report every year. And, it's sad.
Yeah.
So, and the other part, and then for parents, I think you're right when you say, okay, parents, you need to make sure that you're staying connected with your teachers. You want to make your life easier. You need to make sure you're in that constant feedback loop with teachers. You're in that constant loop, that communication loop with teachers. Don't overwhelm them, but certainly if you have questions, you need to ask those questions. Right. Mm-hmm. You do. Those questions, that is your child's education right there, right? And if your teacher is not answering those questions and not giving you the answers that you need to do what you can to get those resources and get those answers. The other thing that we have to look at too is that this has never been done before.
Exactly.
Right. And we're not the only industry that's kind of reinventing the wheel here. And I think it was 1918, we had the Spanish flu, but back then kids had to go back to school because they didn't have the technology they have right now. Yep. So that's why a lot of the classes, you see pictures of them doing classes outside and things like that. We have an amazing opportunity as educators right now to make history and develop new best practices that can be used should this ever happen again.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I'm not I would like to think it won't, but we need to be realistic in expecting it to happen.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah. Right.
And so I think it's kind of cool to be part of that. And parents get to develop best parenting practices for this. Mm-hmm. Kids get to develop the best practices to be students when they're involved in situations like this. So we get to all kind of draw together as a community to develop best practices on all three ends that'll be useful for individuals in the future when and if this happens again.
Yeah.
So
has the school system talked with you? Because I know you mentioned, abuse at home. Has the school system talked with the teachers about online threats? Because I know that has been an issue too, because since kids are, virtual, there's also threats online that can be a problem.
They haven't necessarily talked to us specifically about, I mean, so let me clarify your question. Are you talking about like online predators?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's interesting because, so I teach sixth grade. That's the beginning of, they come in sixth graders and by Christmas break, they're already seventh graders, right? Like that's the transition right there.
Yeah.
And so what happens is for those of you that have kids in that age group, they get involved in social media because they see their friends doing it. And social media can be a good or bad thing, right? It can be. One thing I know about Snapchat, for example, my buddy sits on the Jefferson County. He's one of the Jefferson County SWAT guys. And he tells me a lot of times that when he gets called out to go talk to a kid, it's because of social media. It's because of Snapchat. What's scary is that he was telling me that a lot of times when kids get baited by predators on that specific app, their department can't go trace whatever it is back. They can't go grab it back. Like they can go submit a warrant to get it out of Snapchat servers, but by the time it's already happened, it's already disappeared and it's gone forever.
Oh, yeah.
So they can't trace anything like that back. So Snapchat is something to be concerned about. We make an effort, regardless of the environment the kids are in, to talk to them about online safety. To talk to them about, things like Snapchat. It's okay to use it, but are you using it right? I always tell my students that you should never accept anyone that you haven't met in person, right? And that hasn't met your parents.
Yes.
You should never do that, right? Whether it's Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, it doesn't matter. You should never do that. So we do have those conversations, and kids are pretty smart. They know how to, they know how to tell when something's weird and when something's off with stuff like that. Some of them, I mean, I'm actually pretty tech savvy, I'll say, but I think a lot of teachers and a lot of parents, I don't think they realize what their kids are stepping into without doing the actual research behind it.
I agree 150%.
Or even going through it, I mean.
It's actually crazy on how 10, 11-year-olds, how tech savvy they are.
It's scary.
It's very scary.
I've had to have them show me how to fix things before, and they're good at it, but I mean, it's also like, dude, that's not, like, what are you hiding is my next question.
Yes.
Right? So, and like we have school issued Chromebooks. I do history checks. I do random history checks.
Oh, that's great.
That's
I
awesome.
just call their name up and tell them, bring me your Chromebook. And the minute they're off task,
Can you be my son's teacher? I have a sixth grader. I think that's great. And I think that's what I was kind of getting at is like, because you guys don't have control over what the kids are doing at home, but at the same time, us as parents are at work, so it's it is somewhat of a scary situation, but I think like you saying checking history, I don't know if you can you do that like remotely? Like, are they able to do that with students?
If they're using a district computer, then when we get it back, we can look at it.
That's good.
We can give parents the resources to teach them how to do that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, now Google Chrome has this lovely little feature called incognito.
Oh, yes.
Where it doesn't record the history. Right? So if they're up to something devious, then that's probably what they're going to be using. So, I mean, there's no reason for a sixth grader to be using incognito.
Yeah.
There isn't.
Yeah.
So that's kind of something to keep an eye on. We can't, that also kind of blurs the line of who's responsible for the kids and where. At that point, like when it comes to virtual learning, my responsibility is to make sure that they're getting their learning done. If they're doing something inappropriate with a computer or a cell phone, that's on the parent.
Yes, I agree.
And that's always been my rule. Unless it changes the culture in the classroom, I won't intervene. But if it starts affecting the culture in the classroom, because then you start getting the cyberbullying stuff, then we'll intervene. And we had a situation last year where that started to happen, and it wound up there were like 12 kids involved in this thing. And it wasn't anything bad. It was just, them being mean to each other, right? They were having mean moments. And so the counselor came in and they, did their little circle talk, and some cried, some were like, whatever, it was, but you have to make them aware of that.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. So I guess we kind of already went over like how parents can support you as teachers is just doing our job. And I think, like you said, it's difficult because the lines get blurred in this situation, because it's, not something that parents were prepared for. It's not something that teachers were prepared
Sure.
for. So I think as teachers and parents, we just need to be doing our best to work together.
It's doing
As a
your
team.
best to work together, and it's knowing those boundaries and knowing where your role is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right. I have always believed that parents are going to be the first educators of their child. One thing that I told my parents last year, when we found out we weren't going back to school, I had a big Zoom meeting with my parents, and I told them, look, your job is to parent them,
Mhm.
right? If they're having issues with school, you need to tell them to get in touch with me so I can help them, just like it would be in the normal classroom.
Mhm.
And I had parents. I did something I never done before, and I gave parents my cell phone number. And
Do you regret that?
Actually, I don't. It worked out pretty well. I did wind up at one point giving the kids my cell phone number too, with really strict parameters around
Yeah.
that. But it helped, because if they needed something or they needed help, I could tell them, okay, pop on Zoom real quick. Let's talk about whatever you're having problems with.
Yeah.
Right. And I've told parents, just tell them, you've got to get in touch with Mr. Rogers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that.
Yeah.
Right. So I think you got to know where the roles are.
Yeah, that's very important, because as that was one of my concerns was my 10-year-old, she's Riley, but like she's very smart,
Mhm.
very, very, very smart, and yes, I know a lot of parents say that, but it's she is one of those kids that need that teacher one-on-one
Yeah.
time.
Right.
And I know not all teachers, offer exactly what you offer, but that's just a concern that a lot of parents are probably like, well, a lot of parents are just thinking that virtual school is just popping the computer on and boom, that's it, happy Zoom time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But they gotta, and this is why they have to reach out to their teacher, and when they find out who their kid's teacher is, you got to reach out. And is it bad to ask them, is it bad to ask the teacher, hey, just as a concerned parent, because we are all new at this, are we allowed to ask you what your plan is for school year, and basically reaching out and addressing their concerns, like you said, don't overwhelm with but if it's legit, if a parent wants to know like your plan, is it okay to?
Absolutely. I mean, and we all have to have, we have to have plans.
Right.
I sat down today with my teammate for about an hour and a half, and we planned out, just next week.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
To make sure that we're doing next week right. A lot of schools are going to start focusing on culture and climate right there, because the mental health trauma.
Yes.
I mean, we as
Yes.
adults, I myself went through some of it. Like, I
Yeah.
can't even imagine, what some of these kids have gone through.
Exactly.
Right. So that's going to be a huge area of focus right there. But absolutely, I think asking like, hey, what's your plan if we have to pivot to go online? Right. And, I think what we need to be okay with is the honest answer.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yes. I
If
agree.
that, like, again, we've never done this before.
Mhm.
No superintendent's done this before. No school board's done this before. It's got to be like, I don't know. And honestly, society, it's not just education, but society in of itself is kind of, they're kind of doing last minute things. They're kind of making last minute changes to life to make sure that they can adapt and overcome to it.
Mhm.
I know with my district and with my boss, we get information daily information about this, about what's going on, how things are going to look, and things are starting to smooth out. I feel so bad for my registrar, because she's the one that's, grouping. She was grouping kids into cohorts and everything. The front office looks like a war zone. There's boxes over here, papers over
man.
here.
Wow.
It's just like they're working so hard
Mhm.
to make sure that kids have some semblance of what school was once like. And I think it's also important to remember too, this is temporary.
Yeah.
It's not going to
Yeah.
be like this forever.
That's true.
I'm optimistic that January will see some semblance of normalcy,
Mhm.
but that's just me. Like, that's kind of where my brain is going.
Mhm.
I can't predict the future, but
Which is good. I think it's what we need. And
Right.
I think it's what parents need. I think it's what students need, just to have that willingness to be open to
right.
what could happen, what couldn't happen. Are they back to the mental state,
Yeah.
are they doing anything in your school district to help with, I mean, because it's not fair for the kids, right? Like they're in their houses, they're not able to socialize with their friends. It can be traumatic. Are schools doing something to keep kids social, like with each other?
So,
I mean, obviously not physically, but
and that right. Well,
Yeah.
and that's where us as teachers have to get creative. How do you create that same social environment without the same social environment?
Yeah.
Right. I know last year, like the class that I had last year, those kids were pretty tight. I mean, they became like a second family for each other. And you do feel sorry for them. But really, like the first step in any of that is to create a certain culture in your classroom that is inclusive, that is loving, that is caring, where every kid knows they have a voice, and they have a safe environment to express that voice.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Right? So, I mean, that's the first step. What we kind of rely on as teachers, I think sometimes kids are a little bit more creative than adults, right? And a lot of times we do kind of rely on that creativity to get our own wheels turning and start creating our own things. So we talk with kids about creating roles, like we all come to consensus on that. We really include the kids as much as we can. So I'm going to have some ideas, of course, just some icebreaker games they can play with each other, things like that, just so they can get that social aspect and know each other. But then really kind of springboard off that. It's tough.
Yeah.
It is. It's tough. The social piece, I know they still can go to recess. They're still going to recess. But, that might look different. Like they may not be able to intermingle with other classes.
Yeah.
They can still go to lunch. They might have to sit a little bit further away from their friends, but they can still go to lunch and talk, which is nice. So there's still that. And then, of course, in class, if you think about it, if the cohorts, at least where I'm at, basically split my class into two because I just have one class, right? So it's a smaller group of kids. Just because you're sitting, a further distance away from someone doesn't mean you can't develop a friendship with them. It doesn't mean you can't develop a relationship with them. So really the emphasis is going to be a lot on relationships. And I see a lot of knocking about teachers checking in with kids and just, oh, how are you? What are you doing? The focus last year was culture. It was ensuring that was still there, so those kids still had some sense of socialization, and the mental health didn't take too much of a hit. That was kind of where our focus really was. We did, of course, academics was important, but let's be real. Towards the end, everyone just kind of at one point was like,
yeah, absolutely,
yeah, definitely.
I know I was at the end of the year. I was like, done.
Well, you're kind of in a unique situation too because you're sixth grade, so you're getting the kids that are,
I'm just joking.
Not bad.
Just kidding, Riley.
But just, they're moving into, an older age. It's already an awkward stage for sixth
So we like to
graders.
call it puberty.
Yes.
There you
puberty.
go.
Thank you. Puberty. Yes. So, hats off to you, man, because I don't know if I could do sixth grade, but
they're funny. Really, they are. Some of them know more than they should.
yeah.
But
Yeah, I can see that.
and I tell you what, last year, 75% of the time, I went home kind of giggling at some of the stuff I had to discipline. I had one boy throw a banana at his friend just to do it. In the middle of class, we're sitting there, and I'm helping him with a writing piece, and he just takes this banana and throws it at me.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm like, what are you doing? Seriously? He just didn't. It was a boy thing.
A boy thing. I was gonna say boy
I was
thing.
like, seriously?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Just to close it off.
Yeah.
When we started these interviews with the principal and the other teacher and yourself, I'm gonna be straight up with you. I was one of those frustrated parents. But one thing I can say is that the three of y'all just, I think you put my stress to ease a little bit. Just because there were like 1,000 questions that I had to ask. But, as you guys, talked on and, explaining that you guys as teachers and the principal are really hard at work. Like you guys are really trying to make this work. And I don't think a lot of parents out there are, well, of course they don't see it because it's behind closed doors.
Yeah.
But, I just, honestly, I appreciate everything that you guys are doing just because it makes me feel a lot better.
Yes.
Like when I go home and, I explain to Riley, like, look, these are the three people I had a conversation with today. And, this is how they're painting this is how they're painting the picture on how it's going to look. It's really not that bad. That's the best they can do.
Yeah.
And, my hat's off to you just because, you guys are working so hard to make this work.
Yep.
And us as parents, we have no idea.
Right.
We're not teachers. So we don't, this is new to us too. And, just knowing that the kids are still in good hands, not saying that, they were in bad hands, but with this new thing, behind closed doors, you guys are working very hard to make this work.
We've had a lot of time to really put some thinking into it, and just kind of bouncing off of that, and something that I think, we need to remember with each other, just teachers, principals, parents. My boss told me something a while ago that was actually pretty insightful. I'm going into my 6th year now, but I can't look at myself as being a 6th-year teacher. And the reason why is because, again, no one's done this before.
Right.
I'm a first-year teacher this year.
Very true.
Every single teacher out there who's staying in the profession and doing this is a first-year teacher. Every principal who's doing this is a first-year principal, right? We're all first-year administrators and teachers, and we need to give each other grace, right? We can't keep spewing this hate and, some of the vile things that I see. We can't keep doing that. It's got to be, we have to extend grace to each other, knowing that we're all learning how to adapt to this until it's gone, until we can go back to normal. I won't call it the new normal. This is not normal, right?
Yeah, no.
I will not call it normal. I mean, I have a reference point of what normal is, and I'm looking forward to going back to that. So, but we got to go through this first, and we can't do this without each other.
Yeah.
So
That's
you.
awesome. Thank
yeah,
you.
because I never thought of reaching out to my team. I was always I would wait until conference day or whatever. But, now that I've talked to you, you and the other ones, I'm going to reach out to my teacher and, say, just get information from them, because that's going to be my kids, whether it's in person. So we're doing a hybrid thing too.
Okay.
So whether it's in person or online, that's who my kid is going to be looking up to for the next several months, regardless if it's in person or not. So, because I want my kid to feel comfortable going to them. And again, she's starting 6th grade. So it's one of those deals. But now I'm going to reach out to my teacher or her teacher and, just have the same conversation that we had. And I think all parents should try and do that,
Yes.
Don't overwhelm your teachers. You heard it first from.
And I mean,
don't be afraid to ask questions.
You're right, exactly, and I think that's the main point. Like, parents should be asking questions. Like, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So before we end, is there anything that you want to just put out there for parents? Any suggestions or just ideas that you have just to our audience?
I think the 3 big things that I want to leave off is that, again, remember everyone's first year in this. Grace is a huge thing right now. And I'm tagging along with grace, optimism, right? Because one of the things that I noticed about my job is that when I'm in a bad mood and it's clearly coming off of me, it goes back into the kids, and the kids give that straight back to me, and it just creates this nasty ping pong, right? So parents have got to, we've got to all be optimistic, okay? We've got to work together with that. And, don't be afraid to ask questions, but don't be afraid of the answer, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? I think a lot of times that ambiguity and that vagueness, it scares people. It scares me. When they say, I don't know, it's just like crap, right? Don't be afraid of that, I don't know, right? So those are just kind of the 3 big things I would toss out there to parents and to teachers. And
that's perfect.
Well,
Matt, we really appreciate you coming on, and this has been
appreciate it.
Really helpful. Just for us parents, and I'm assuming for all of our viewers as well. And you've had some really great information to share. And we'd love to have you back on in a few
Absolutely.
months, and we
Yeah.
can just kind of check in. And
Yeah.
if you learned anything, and yeah,
It's gonna be a wild ride this year, guys.
It will be.
I know.
Definitely will be.
What was it? There
Yeah.
was something on Facebook I saw. It was, are we shopping for new school clothes or more alcohol this year? We're hybrids, so maybe both.
There you go.
Definitely
Never thought about
both.
that.
Definitely.
Right?